Anyway, we now have Sam Faddis on the show with us here. Mr. Faddis, always a pleasure. Thanks for joining us once again here on Montana Talks.
Happy to be here. Hope we have a good connection now.
Yeah, we got you Lima Charlie now, so thanks for being with us here. First off, we got a couple minutes here before we take our first break here. Time to clean house on the deep state. Your thoughts?
Yeah, without question. And I should say up front, just as a caveat before we dive into all this stuff, as a career intelligence officer, I'm not indicting the average man and woman serving the country in the intelligence community. But we got a major problem at senior levels with some individuals, and I don't think, frankly, that they're all out of service, both in service and out, and it's a big problem and it's a real threat.
Yeah, I concur with you. Every time I've talked about this story, I've been clear, and I think others have been clear. Look, when we talk about abuses that are going on and deep, we're not talking about the average FBI agent on the ground or the average officers out there, because they do a great job. They serve their country day after day, and they put their own personal agendas and politics aside to serve their country. And unfortunately, there's some political hacks back in Washington, D.C. who cannot do that and instead are abusing their positions of power.
Yeah, that is unfortunately absolutely 100% true. And it is not a minor irritation. It is not an annoyance. It has risen to the level where this kind of issue, frankly, across the entire senior ranks of the bureaucracy is a real threat to the republic.
Yeah, your blog post, you talk about how we used to laugh about this kind of thing. We used to just laugh at these banana republics and seizing power simply whenever they so chose. But yet, this very same phenomenon. Talk about how, from your perspective as a retired CIA operations officer, this same phenomenon is now on display in D.C.
Right. Well, as you just highlighted, it used to be sort of the hallmark of American democracy that we had a respect for the rule of law and a respect for the electoral process, and that's how we changed power. And the idea that somebody just decides on his own, hey, I know best what's for everybody else, so I'm going to stage a coup, we denigrated. And yet now that philosophy is increasingly openly on display. It's not just that we have had a coup attempt, we have another one underway, there will be another one after this if this one fails. It's that increasingly people are just out in the open saying, well, of course we're getting rid of this guy because we don't agree with him. We consider him to be whatever, crude, uncouth, whatever word they want to use. Anyway, as if this is a legitimate thing, as if like an unelected bureaucrat in Washington, D.C., who performs, by the way, there's no mention of this entire edifice anywhere in the Constitution, but as if this guy has a right to substitute his judgment for that of the American people. I'm all for, if you hate Donald Trump, then go get rid of him the way the Constitution envisions. I'm not agreeing with that, but if that's your position, then vote him out of office, because that's the way the system works. Once you go down this road to where the elite in D.C. decides who rules and who doesn't, well, then we do not have a democracy anymore. That's just straight up as clear as I can be.
Yeah, and it's even more divisive in this country and really just dividing this country at this time where we really need some more unity. What do you think, too, of these latest headlines? Now we're seeing the old tweets from the so-called CIA whistleblower's attorney all the way back in January 2017 where he wrote, "A coup has started." That seems pretty telling. That seems kind of like a smoking gun here that this whole thing has been orchestrated from the start.
Without question, this is orchestrated. Was orchestrated from the beginning. It is orchestrated now. The idea that you're looking, if you're the average citizen who's busy just trying to make a living and get the kids off to school, and you think that what you're seeing are sort of disconnected individuals speaking up, and there is nothing disconnected or haphazard about any of this. This is all manipulated. It is a giant puppet show, and it is incredibly dangerous. And you could be the most diehard Democrat in the world and despise Donald Trump. But you have to understand that once these rules are broken and once the system is destroyed, you can't put it back together again just because there's a Democrat in the White House in 4 years or whatever. We now move into territory in which we have destroyed the foundations of the republic, and you can't just put that back together. I said, talking to a good friend of mine who's a retired diplomat the other day, he and I were having a long discussion, and he and I both agreed, realistically, what's the difference between what we've seen over the last 3 years and simply somebody announcing in 2016, if they had realized what was happening in time, what that election was invalid, Russian interference, I'm not leaving the White House, we're dismissing the results of the election, we'll have an election sometime down the road whenever we think it's safe to do so. And then we really are done with the republic. We have somebody who declares martial law in the White House because he doesn't like the results. I mean, that's, once upon a time that was science fiction. That's a novel nobody would have published because it's so insane. And yet you can't say that anymore. I mean, we are inches away from that reality.
Yeah, I mean, we've heard people talk about this. In fact, even NBC's Meet the Press sent cameras out to the battleground states to hear directly from voters, and they talked about it. I think Meet the Press did not expect the reaction they got, but the voters were saying this is childish. This is like a temper tantrum by House Democrats. They need to focus on moving this country forward, not on this. But really, it is bigger than that because it's not. These aren't just childish temper tantrum actors. It could have devastating results for our country. Your headline on your latest commentary piece: "The deep state no longer fake news." Now they're openly. If you would have used the word deep state a year ago, which many of us did, they would have said, "Oh, that's just conspiracy theories. Come on, now you can't talk about the deep state." Well, now they're even openly talking about the deep state. In fact, a former acting director of the CIA said, "Thank God for the deep state." And you wrote about that.
Right. There was a panel discussion at an institute that's affiliated with George Mason University, which is in Northern Virginia, basically just across the river from Washington, D.C. And they had, 4 people on stage. One was John McLaughlin, who I used to have tremendous respect for, who was an acting director of the CIA. He's the guy that said, in response to the moderator raising the issue of, hey, isn't there really some legitimate concern here about the deep state and destabilizing a sitting president? And his literal response, word for word, was, "Thank God for the deep state." And the other people sitting on that stage with him were John Brennan, who is as close to an architect of the first coup attempt as we can identify. Let's see, who else was there? Mike Morrell, who was also an acting director of the CIA. He's the guy that lied after Benghazi to cover for Barack Obama. And the fourth was, I'm drawing a blank now, the fourth was an FBI official.
Yeah, I can't remember if Comey was there or if it was somebody else who was at that one. Maybe it was McCabe, yeah. Yep.
Was the fourth individual, I believe. But basically you have 4 individuals who at this point have just openly affiliated themselves with the deep state, if that's the right term, sitting there in broad daylight, and then went on at some length to not just say thank God for the deep state, but then describe how great this is that we have all these people trooping up to Capitol Hill and how we should be celebrating this. And as you say, they're not hiding in the shadows anymore. They're trumpeting this. They're saying, this is fantastic, and yes, it's our job to tear down this man because we don't agree with his politics and we don't like him. And, I'm all for you don't like Donald Trump. That's great. Go run for office, campaign for somebody. Let's go to the polls and find out what the country wants. That's how the system works. And if you scrap that system, there is nothing between that and dictatorship. That's exactly where we are.
If you, Sam Faddis, as a CIA operations officer, which of course you had a career as a CIA operations officer, if you had launched a spy operation like was done against President Trump in 2016, if there were text messages from you saying, hey, we need to have an insurance policy in case Hillary Clinton won, and in case Hillary Clinton wins the election, if you had launched a spy operation against a Democrat candidate for president like Hillary Clinton while you were a CIA operations officer, what do you think would have happened to you right now?
Yeah, well, I mean, I'd be talking to you if they would allow me from federal prison somewhere right now, as well I should. I mean, on the other hand, if when I was a CIA guy, I stored tens of thousands of classified emails on a server in my basement, I would have also been locked up a long time ago. I mean, we've been going down this road for a while of a strange double standard.
Yeah. I mean, we've even seen junior enlisted soldiers and sailors that have been sent to prison for a fraction of what Hillary Clinton got away with. It's quite remarkable. Well, yeah, we're talking with Sam Faddis, former CIA operations officer. You actually led one of the first CIA teams into Iraq prior to the invasion, as I understand it as well.
Yeah, well, I'm going to give you one correction. I led the first team into Iraq.
Wow.
Which is not me bragging on myself. That's me making sure my guys get credit for what they did. Yeah,
Great.
We went in
I appreciate that. Yeah.
9 months before the invasion, I guess. Yeah, 9-10 months before the invasion. We went into the country and were there all the way through the invasion until the fall of Mosul, Kirkuk, and Baghdad.
Yeah, that's remarkable. Yeah, in fact, I had a friend that I served with in Afghanistan. I'd usually grab coffee with him at Fob Lightning whenever I went back to get supplies or something, and he was a naval intelligence officer. So he actually, when I mentioned that you were going to be on the show, he commented on the Facebook post and said, wow, he was the guy who did that, and had referenced one of your books written about that very topic. Well, intelligence. I've read some books that my friend I just mentioned had shared with me, and some of these books about the CIA, they talk about, different types of intelligence. There's SIGINT, there's HUMINT, signals intelligence, humans intelligence. I was joking with a friend. I'm not an intelligence officer guy, of course, but I was joking with a friend who was an intelligence NCO, and he said, well, we were joking about the story. He said, well, that's just RUMINT. That's just rumors intelligence. And so I thought that was hilarious. There actually is a thing called RUMINT. We should just rename the House Intelligence Committee the House RUMINT Committee, because it's all rumors, right? Well, I heard it from a friend who heard it from a friend who. What's your thoughts?
Well, I mean, you have to understand that obviously, if the Democratic Party or the folks within it that are affiliated with what I'm just going to straight up call a coup attempt, if they can actually remove the president from his position, they would be very happy to do so, and that is a serious threat.
All right, let's get into your calls here as we talk with retired CIA operations officer Sam Faddis here on Montana Talks. Let's see, we've got Daryl in Kalispell listening to KJJR. Daryl, did you have a quick question or comment for Mr. Faddis?
Yeah, basically, I want to know why we can't use the RICO laws against these people. Shouldn't they apply based on the substance of those laws?
All right, thanks, Daryl. Yeah, and probably a whole host of laws that could be used against some of this here. Sam Faddis, your thoughts?
Well, whether these situations or these actions specifically fall under RICO, I think I'd have to go dig up the statute. And by the way, the skeleton in my closet is I'm also a lawyer, so I don't have to go dust off all of that knowledge to review. But as you pointed out, there's no shortage of crimes that individuals can be charged with here and should have been charged with for a number of years. We were referencing Hillary Clinton in the emails. Well, there's no problem with finding a crime that she committed. There's just a problem in Washington with accountability and political will, and that's exactly where we are. So, yes, I hope to God we start seeing some people prosecuted. I would love to see, coming out of the investigations that are ongoing right now, charges being pressed against Mr. Brennan, who used to be head of the Central Intelligence Agency, for what I think is obvious criminal conduct.
Yeah, and I mean, he's a political hack who was put in the position. He goes all the way back. He had close ties to the Clintons, and and that investigation, and that's the deal. The real investigation is underway right now, which is the John Durham, the prosecutor, I think out of Connecticut, who's leading that investigation, which all goes back to Ukraine and the real collusion that actually took place in the 2016 elections between the DNC, the Ukraine, and elsewhere. Let's see. Let's get to another caller here. Daniel in Bozeman. Did you have a quick question or comment for Mr. Sam Faddis here? Go ahead, Daniel.
Yeah, I'm in my 70s, and I've heard these reports of covert operations for many years. It says the CIA works the banana republics rich in oil and minerals and get them more in line with American values, and then in the name of this freedom and democracy actually destabilizes countries to open them up to use by corporations to extract these riches and depend on the American elite. Now, you talk about cleaning house. How would we clean up our superior attitude toward lesser countries and the high and mighty elitist way that has infected even the littlest of the American people?
All right. We'll throw that question to Sam Faddis. Sam, your take.
Well, I mean, I guess fundamentally I disagree with the characterization of what the Central Intelligence Agency does. I spent 20 years running operations for CIA, almost all of that abroad, almost all of that undercover. The idea that we were going around continuously manipulating governments for the benefit of some U.S. corporation is not at all an accurate description of what the average man and woman's doing out there. What he's trying to do is keep Americans safe in their beds at night, and probably getting paid very little for it and getting very little recognition. So I got nothing but respect for them.
And
I distinguish that, obviously, from Mr. Brennan.
Yeah, and in part, obviously, because we know, because we don't know much about the CIA, and frankly, we shouldn't know much about it, right? Because that's how, that's their job. But yet you get all these conspiracy theories that are out there that go on because of the fact that people don't know too much about the CIA and how it operates. But that kind of ties in with my question. Was it back in the 70s or so? And I don't know too much about the Church Committee, but there were perceived abuses that were going on, rogue actions against foreign leaders, maybe spying against American citizens. And by golly, there was a Church Committee and there was outrage on Capitol Hill, and they cracked down on some of these agencies. And my whole point is, if this spy operation that occurred on American citizens, on American political campaign, had occurred against Hillary Clinton, we would already have a Church Committee type of operation. But instead, we have an entire party on Capitol Hill basically staging a coup and the media defending them.
Yeah, I couldn't possibly agree more with you. There were actually two committees, the Church Committee and the Pike Committee, one in each chamber, one in the Senate, one in the House, dug into the CIA. And I should say, by the way, there's absolutely should be congressional oversight of CIA. Americans don't much trust spy organizations. I think that's healthy. That's in our nature. And our elected representatives should absolutely have visibility into what they do. That doesn't change the fact that I think that a lot of what the Church Committee accused the CIA of was nonsense, or at worst, doing their jobs. But if the shoe was on the other foot here, oh my God, we would have committees all over the place and people being dragged in and questioned as to what they did. Instead, we have the former head of the CIA, Mr. Brennan, for years told us he was in possession of definitive information proving that the president was in collusion with the Russians and the election had been manipulated. Proven to be false. And he still has not been held to account to, okay, well, if you didn't stage a coup, then you must be the most incompetent spy master on the planet. If you told us for 2 or 3 years the president was a Russian agent, now what are you saying? You were wrong? Is that you made it all up? There needs to be accountability. There has been none. I hope to God coming out of the ongoing investigations there will be.
Well, and then at one point, I mean, didn't Brennan basically call for the overthrow of the President of the United States and then had the nerve to whine that he lost his security clearance after the fact? I mean, to me was just crazy.
Yes, I mean, look, the man has admitted to the fact that he ran an operation out of the Central Intelligence Agency in cooperation with the FBI, directed at this whole allegation of Russian interference, which then, after exhaustive investigation and the expense of millions of dollars, was proven to be completely bogus, and yet as still parading around in broad daylight, smug and acting as if that's no big deal, and he can't imagine that he will ever be held to account for it. That's about the most gross abuse of the position by the director of the Central Intelligence Agency you can imagine, an attempt to depose a sitting president of the United States.
Yeah, and I imagine you served under both Democrat and Republican administrations. I mean, I went to Iraq under a Republican president, and Afghanistan under, and another place under a Democrat president. And I couldn't just put down my rifle and say, "Oh, nope, sorry, not going to serve that, not my president." And yet, that's what these senior political hacks in Washington D.C. are doing: is nope. Not only am I not going to serve my country because I don't like this president, I'm actually going to undermine this president in this country, is what it seems like is going on.
Yeah, and as you well know, look, not only don't you get to just quit, but particularly in the business of intelligence, we don't serve political interests. You made reference to me being in Iraq. I was in Iraq in the summer of 2002. We were working against, preparing for the invasion and also working against Islamic extremists, members of Al-Qaeda and affiliated groups that had moved into northern Iraq. The White House very much would have loved for us to have established a connection between Saddam Hussein and Osama bin Laden, because politically that would have been very useful in justifying an invasion of Iraq. We knew that. Didn't make any difference to what we collected. In fact, to the point where I called the team together one day. I didn't need to tell them this, but I wanted them to hear it from my lips, and said, we all know this, and it doesn't change anything about how we do our jobs. We collect intelligence. We do it by the numbers. We tell the truth. We report it to Washington, D.C. What they do with it politically is their business. But we're pros, and it doesn't matter who's in the White House. We're going to do it by the numbers. We don't serve political interests. We serve the American people.
Yeah.
Again, I didn't need to tell my team that. They were all professionals. I just wanted them to hear it out loud from my lips. And that is the way business was always conducted in the Central Intelligence Agency, wherever I was on the ground.
Let's go to Dennis in Belgrade, listening to 1450 KMMS. Dennis, did you have a quick question or comment for Mr. Faddis here?
Just a history question. Didn't President Kennedy speak before the people prior to his assassination about certain entities in our government which were basically deep state back then?
Good question. Good question. So, talking about JFK, President JFK. Yeah, because the headline, that's a good question, because, of course, the headline of Sam Faddis's commentary piece here is "The Deep State, no longer fake news. It's time to clean house on the deep state." Sam Faddis, your take. I did pull up a Politico piece here. Jeff Greenfield, just a few days ago, has a headline, "When JFK was Trump." Any insight on that?
Well, I don't remember that exact quote, but I think it is completely accurate to say that this problem did not emerge last week, and it didn't emerge when Donald Trump was elected in 2016. We have a federal government that now employs roughly 7 million people, has a budget around $1 trillion. It is a gigantic, vast, incredibly powerful, entrenched edifice, combined with a political class where basically if you're in Congress and you run for re-election, you never lose. And if you leave Congress, it's because you decided to, or they had to carry you out. Married up with corporations, PACs, name any giant moneyed interest. And when you start adding all of this stuff up together, what you find is that increasingly the system does not work the way it was designed, right? It doesn't work for you, the average American. It is increasingly outside of your control and impervious to your influence. And that ought to terrify us all. Again, I don't care if you're a Republican, a Democrat, an Independent, a Green Party person. that ought to terrify you that that's happening.
Yeah, in fact, in this Jeffrey Greenfield piece that Politico posted, I think just about a week ago, when JFK was trumped by Jeff Greenfield, I think he's a former CNN guy. Anyway, I didn't see Deep State in here, but he might have said something like that, but it's not in this piece at least. But Kennedy did refer to, and of course, President Kennedy was a military veteran. Kennedy pushed back against the, quote, permanent government by relying on different eyes and ears for advice and information. And most obvious was his turn to his brother, Robert Kennedy. He used his brother as a key advisor. And but that's really kind of front and center in this impeachment inquiry circus as well, because they're attacking President Trump. Well, he's going around the traditional foreign policy apparatus. Like, they're basically complaining that he's not relying 100% on the deep state to make all of his decisions and enact his foreign policy.
Yeah, I mean, so just to focus on that one little detail here, there's been a bunch of discussion about how, the president's not listening to this ambassador or that ambassador. Okay, this is the way this works. The president of the United States is in charge. He's the boss. The ambassador is his representative on the ground in a particular country. She works for the president of the United States. Should they provide input and should they provide advice? Yes, that's what they're there for. At the end of the day, when the boss says, thanks for your recommendation, but that's not what I'm going with, the answer is you salute and execute, or you resign. The answer is not that you are now entitled to work within the system, subvert the president's will, and then complain that he should do what you told him to do. That's not how this system is built. So it is madness to suggest that somehow the president has done something wrong by ignoring the advice of his ambassador. And by the way, this president didn't invent that. Every president routinely has ignored the input from ambassadors all over the planet, sometimes for very, very good reasons.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's not like ambassadors are perfect either. I mean, that's been a highly politicized process, in itself. Sam Faddis, we greatly appreciate your time this morning. I encourage everybody to follow your blog and magazine, all of that. You were one of the first time I started hearing about who you were, it was through a Federalist piece where you were tracking the funding and who was paying for it, who was providing support for the Central American migrant caravans tied to the Libre Marxist movement and more. So always appreciate your insight. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you.